I drove 2 hours to Briar Glen expecting a routine signature, not an execution. I was 33 and stupid enough to believe my father called this meeting out of respect. Instead, I sat in that suffocating office and watched him hand my brother the entire estate, every acre and every asset, without flinching. He didn't just cut me out of the will. He looked me in the eye and told the room it was a legacy decision. The drive to Briar Glen always felt like traveling backward in time. I left my apartment in Ridgeway City at 7 in the morning, watching the sharp glass skylines of the financial district fade into the rearview mirror, replaced gradually by the rolling green hills and jagged coastline of the north. By the time I crossed the town line, the air had changed. It was heavier here, saturated with salt spray and the smell of wet pine, a scent that used to mean home, but now just smelled like obligation. I was 33 years old. I had a senior analyst position at a logistics firm that did not know my father's name, an apartment I paid for with my own money, and a life that was pleasantly boring. Yet, as I pulled my sedan into the gravel lot of Walker Hale Industries, my stomach tightened with the familiar, childish anxiety of being summoned to the principal's office. The email from my father's executive assistant had been vague. A family update, that was the subject line. No details. Just a date and a time. I assumed it was minor estate planning. Perhaps he was finally setting up the trust for the grandchildren he did not have yet. Or maybe he was changing the executor details. It was a Saturday, which meant the office was technically closed, but the lights in the second-floor conference room were blazing. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. I looked tired, but I looked professional. I had chosen a navy blazer and sharp trousers, armor against the inevitable critique. I took a breath, stepped out into the damp coastal wind, and walked toward the building that had consumed my father's entire life. The lobby was silent, the receptionist's desk empty and polished to a shine that looked wet. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of my heels on the hardwood echoing like gunshots in the quiet building. When I reached the conference room, I paused at the frosted glass door. I could hear low voices inside, not just my father's baritone, but others, a murmur of agreement, a shuffle of papers. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of stale coffee and expensive leather. My father, Robert Walker, sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked exactly as he always did, imposing, silver-haired, his suit jacket unbuttoned to reveal a starch-stiff white shirt. He did not look up when I entered. He was busy aligning a stack of documents with the edge of the table, a meticulous habit that signaled he was controlling the room. But it was the other people at the table that made me stop short. My brother, Ethan, was there, sitting to my father's right. He looked pale, his hands clasped tightly together on the table as if he were praying. Next to him was Jim Sterling, the family attorney, a man who had known me since I was in braces. That part was expected. What I had not expected were the 3 men on the opposite side of the table. Sitting with rigid posture were George Holloway and Silas Vance, 2 of the most senior board members of Walker Hale Industries, and at the far end, leaning back with a casualness that felt rehearsed, was Marcus Thorne, a longtime family friend and a private investor who often played golf with my father. This was not a family meeting. This was a tribunal. Lucy. My father finally looked up. "You are late. I checked my watch. I'm 3 minutes early." "Dad, sit down." He gestured to the empty chair at the foot of the table, the position furthest from him. "We have a lot to get through." I took my seat. The leather was cold. I looked at Ethan, trying to catch his eye, trying to find some hint of what was happening. But he stared resolutely at a knot in the wood of the table. He looked terrified. "Jim," my father said, nodding to the attorney. Jim Sterling cleared his throat. He stood up, adjusting his glasses. He held a thick binder in his hands, not the usual thin manila folders used for minor updates. "Thank you all for coming on a weekend," Jim began. His voice was thin, reedy. "Robert asked us here today to formalize the restructuring of the Walker estate and the future governance of the company. As you know, Walker Hale is facing a critical expansion year. Stability is paramount." I frowned. Governance of the company? I had no role in the company. I had never wanted a role in the company. Why was I here for a board discussion? Jim continued. In the interest of that stability, and ensuring the legacy of the Walker name remains intact for the next generation, Robert has made a decision regarding the distribution of assets. Effective immediately upon the filing of these documents, the entirety of the Walker estate, including the controlling interest in Walker Hale Industries, the primary residence, and all associated land holdings, will be designated to Ethan Walker as the sole beneficiary and successor. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at Jim, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the clause that explained my share. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I looked at my father. He was watching me, his face impassive, like he was studying a balance sheet. The entire estate? I asked. My voice was steady, shockingly so. My father leaned forward, clasping his hands. Lucy, listen to me. This is not a punishment. This is a strategic necessity. Strategic? I repeated. You have your own life in Ridgeway, he said. He spoke smoothly, his voice filled with a performative pride that made my skin crawl. You have built a career. You are independent. You are successful. You do not need the burden of this company. Ethan does. Ethan has stayed here. He has put in the time on the ground. He needs the infrastructure of the estate to maintain his position as CEO when I step down. He was framing my disinheritance as a compliment. He was telling a room full of men that I was too successful to be paid, while my brother was too dependent to be left without a safety net. So, I said, keeping my hands under the table so they would not see them shaking, because I made something of myself. My reward is nothing, and because Ethan has never left Briar Glen, he gets everything. It is about legacy. Lucy, George Halloway cut in. His voice was gravelly. The company needs a single voice. Splitting the shares would dilute the voting power. Your father is doing this to protect the family name. I looked at George. I realized then that they had all discussed this before I walked in. They had already agreed. I was not here to participate in a discussion. I was here to be notified. I was a prop in a scene my father was directing. I looked at Ethan again. Ethan, I said. He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Ethan, are you okay with this? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced quickly at our father, then back to his hands. It makes sense. Lucy, for the company. The betrayal hit me harder than the money. My brother, who I had defended on the playground, who I had tutored through calculus, who I had covered for 1,000 times, was sitting there letting them erase me. My father stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. The papers are drawn up. We are filing on Monday. I wanted you to hear it from me, Lucy, rather than reading it in a letter. I wanted us to be adults about this. Adults. He used the word like a weapon. If I argued, I was a child. If I cried, I was hysterical. The only way to win was to be as cold as he was. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I understand. I said. My father blinked. He seemed disappointed he didn't get a fight. Good. Then we are agreed. I turned and walked to the door. I did not say goodbye. I could feel their eyes on my back, the heavy, judging weight of the men in charge watching the girl leave the room. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking, but once I turned the corner toward the lobby, I stopped. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard, trying to keep the humiliation from turning into tears. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't about the money. I had my own money. It was the public nature of it. He had brought an audience to watch him cut me loose. I heard the conference room door open. Footsteps. I held my breath. It is done, Jim, I heard my father say. His voice was lower now, stripped of the performative warmth. He looked rattled. Robert, Jim replied. Ethan, he will get over it. My father said dismissively. He has to. We are out of time. The partner is losing patience. If we do not show a consolidated front by the 1st of the month, the whole deal falls apart. The partner? I frowned. Walker Hale was a family-owned company. There were no partners. We had investors. Sure. But the partner sounded singular, specific. He just needs to hold it together until the signing. Jim said, "Do you think Lucy will cause problems?" "She is proud." My father said, "She will leave. She will go back to her city and pretend she does not care. That is who she is." I pressed a hand over my mouth. He knew me. He had weaponized my own independence against me. The footsteps faded as they walked toward the elevators. I waited 10 seconds, then 20, before I pushed off the wall. I needed to get out of there. I needed air. I made it to the parking lot before I heard my name. "Lucy!" I turned. Ethan was jogging toward me, his tie loosened, his suit jacket flapping in the wind. He looked desperate. I unlocked my car door. "Go celebrate your inheritance." "Ethan, Lucy, please." He grabbed my car door, preventing me from opening it. "I did not ask for this. You have to believe me." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was sweating, despite the cold. His hands were shaking. "You did not say no," I said coldly. "You sat there and let him humiliate me in front of the board." "I couldn't," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. "You do not know what it has been like here. He is intense lately. Lucy, he has been obsessed with this restructuring. If I pushed back, he would have burned the whole thing down. So you let him burn me instead," I said. "It is not about the money," Ethan said. "I will make it right. Once the papers are signed, once I have control, I will transfer half to you. I swear." "We just need to get through this week." He sounded frantic. "Why just this week?" I asked, remembering the conversation in the hallway. "What happens this week?" Ethan flinched. "Nothing. Just the fiscal year, the banks. You know how he gets about deadlines." He was lying. I could see it in the way his eyes darted to the left. "You are scared of him," I said softly. Ethan let go of my car door. He stepped back. His shoulders slumped. "We all are. Lucy, you are the only one who got away. Maybe that is why he did this, to punish you for leaving. Or maybe he is trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "By disinheriting me? That is a hell of a logic." "Ethan?" He didn't answer. He just stood there in the gray light, looking like a little boy in a suit that was too big for him. "Goodbye." "Ethan," I said. I got into my car and slammed the door. I didn't look back as I peeled out of the lot, gravel crunching under my tires. The drive back to Ridgeway City was a blur. I didn't play the radio. I just drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I replayed the meeting in my head a dozen times. The board members. Why were they there? Estate planning was personal. It was private. Why did George Holloway care who got the lake house? Why did they care about consolidated voting power unless something big was coming up for a vote? I reached my apartment in Ridgeway by late afternoon. It was a modern loft in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and high ceilings. Usually, I loved it. Today, it felt cold. I dropped my keys on the counter and immediately called Marin. Marin Price picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you didn't sign anything," she said. "I didn't have to," I said, walking into my kitchen and pouring a glass of water just to have something to do with my hands. "I wasn't asked to sign anything. I was told I'm getting nothing." "What?" Marin's voice went up an octave. "Nothing? Like zero?" "Ethan gets it all," I said. "The company, the house, the land. Dad said it was because I am successful, and Ethan needs the stability." "That is garbage," Marin said immediately. "That is absolute garbage. Lucy, your father is an archaic dinosaur, but he is not stupid. He knows you are the one with the business head. Ethan couldn't run a lemonade stand without a consultant." "I know," I said, leaning against the counter. "Who else was there?" Marin asked. "Just the usual," I said. "Jim Sterling, and George Holloway and Silas Vance." Marin paused. "Wait, the board members?" "Yeah." "And Marcus Thorne?" "Yes." "Lucy," Marin said slowly, "that is not an estate meeting. That is a shareholder meeting." I frowned. "What do you mean?" You do not bring the board to a reading of a will unless the will changes the corporate structure immediately. Marin said, she was a corporate auditor. She lived for this kind of structural analysis. If your dad is handing 100% of the controlling interest to Ethan right now, while he is still alive, he is not just passing the torch. He is shielding assets. Shielding them from what? I asked. I do not know. Marin said, liability? A lawsuit? Maybe he is about to do something risky and he wants his name off the books. Or maybe he already did something risky. I thought about the conversation in the hallway. The partner's losing patience. He mentioned a partner. I said, I overheard him telling Jim that the partner is losing patience. Marin hummed, Walker Hale doesn't have partners. It is a closed loop. Unless what? Unless they took on private equity and didn't disclose it. Marin said, Lucy, you need to see those papers. You need to see exactly what Ethan is inheriting. Because if the company is in trouble, Ethan isn't inheriting a fortune. He is inheriting a grenade. A chill went down my spine. Ethan's face in the parking lot. He thinks you will save me. I hung up with Marin and immediately dialed Jim Sterling's office. It was Saturday, but Jim forwarded his office calls to his cell. He always had. Hello? Jim's voice was guarded. Jim, it is Lucy. I said, Lucy. He sighed. Look, I know you are upset. I am not upset. I lied. I am just updating my own records. Since I have been removed from the estate, I need a copy of the new structure for my own accountant. To show I have no expected assets. It was a bluff. I didn't have an accountant who cared about my future inheritance. I can't send them yet. Jim said quickly. Too quickly. Why not? They are drafted. You said you are filing Monday. Your father wants everything finalized and stamped before we distribute copies. Jim said, he wants to make sure there are no last-minute changes. Jim, I said, my voice hardening, that is not legal procedure. If I am a named party, even a removed one, I have a right to see the draft. It is Robert's instructions. Lucy, Jim said, I will send you a copy next week, once it is done. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was stalling. A lawyer never stalled on sending a document unless the document contained something they didn't want you to see until it was too late to challenge it. I didn't sleep well that night. I dreamed of the conference room, but instead of my father at the head of the table, there was a shadow, a faceless shape that kept tapping its watch. Sunday morning broke gray and rainy in Ridgeway. I made coffee and sat at my laptop, scrolling through Walker Hale's public website. It was outdated, filled with stock photos of happy factory workers and my father's biography, integrity, tradition, excellence. My email pinged. I tabbed over. It was a message from an address I didn't recognize. user77492protonmail.com. The subject line was blank. I hovered over it. My spam filter hadn't caught it, which meant it was a direct send. I clicked it open. The body of the email was 2 sentences. You were cut out to keep you from seeing the real numbers. Don't sign anything. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the words. The real numbers. There was an attachment, a JPEG file. I clicked it. The image opened. It was a blurry, low-light photo taken with a cell phone. It showed a physical ledger page, the kind my father insisted on using because he didn't trust the cloud. The handwriting was unmistakably my father's. Tight. Angular script. Most of the page was out of focus, but one line was circled in red ink. $5.1 million. S.P. Next to it was a date from 3 months ago, and a note in the margin. Bridge requirement. I sat back. My coffee forgotten. $5 million. For a company the size of Walker Hale. That wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't pocket change either. It was a significant chunk of liquidity. And who was S.P.? Silent partner? I debated deleting it. This felt like the start of a movie I didn't want to be in. If I deleted it, I could go back to my life. I could let Ethan have the estate and whatever mess came with it. I could be safe. But then I thought about Ethan's face. He thinks you will save me. And I thought about my father's smug certainty that I would just walk away. My phone rang. The screen flashed Dad. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I picked up. "Hello? Lucy." My father's voice was warm, too warm. It sounded like he was performing for an audience again. "I was calling to see if you made it back to the city safely." "I did." I said, "Good, good. Listen, I know yesterday was abrupt. I know it came as a shock. You could say that. I want to smooth things over." He said, "We are having a dinner tonight, at the Juniper Room. Just family and Sasha. Of course. We are celebrating Ethan's new chapter. I want you to be there." "Celebrating?" I asked. "You kicked me out of the family legacy yesterday, and you want me to come celebrate it today?" "Don't be dramatic. Lucy," he snapped, his tone slipping for a second before he recovered. "It is important to Ethan that you are there. He looks up to you, and honestly, it is important to the family image. People talk. If you aren't there, they will think there is a rift. There is a rift, Dad, but we are a team," he said, "and team players show up, even when they are on the bench." The bench? He just couldn't help himself. I looked at the computer screen, at the blurry photo of the ledger. $5.1 million. If I stayed in Ridgeway, I would never know what SP stood for. I would never know why Jim Sterling was lying to me. I would never know why my brother looked like a man marching to the gallows. If I went back, I wasn't going as his daughter. I wasn't going as the team player on the bench. I was going as the opposition. "Okay," I said. "You'll come?" He sounded relieved. "I'll be there," I said. "What time?" 7 o'clock. Wear something nice. Lucy, there might be a few people stopping by to wish Ethan well." I hung up. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the soft sweaters and comfortable jeans. I pulled out a black dress that fit like a sheath, sharp and unyielding. I pulled out my highest heels. My father wanted a show of stability. He wanted a silent, smiling daughter to validate his decisions. He was going to get the smile, but he wasn't going to get the silence. I grabbed my bag, saved the email image to an encrypted folder on my hard drive, and headed back out the door. The drive to Briar Glen usually took 2 hours. I planned to make it in 1 hour and 45 minutes. I had work to do. The Juniper Room was the kind of restaurant that existed solely to let the wealthy people of Briar Glen look at other wealthy people while eating $30 scallops. It had low lighting, heavy velvet curtains, and a hush that felt less like intimacy and more like a conspiracy. My father had reserved the center table, the one that commanded a view of the entire dining room. I walked in 10 minutes late on purpose, wearing the black dress that felt like armor. The maitre d' bowed his head slightly as he led me through the maze of tables. I could feel the eyes of the town on me, in a place this small. News of the inheritance meeting would have leaked by now. They were looking for cracks. They were looking to see if the exiled daughter was crying or fighting. I kept my face perfectly still. When I reached the table, my father stood up. He was beaming. It was a terrifying sight. "There she is," he announced, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "The city girl returns." He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a vice. He steered me into the empty chair next to Ethan. My brother looked even worse than he had in the parking lot. His skin was the color of old parchment, and he was sweating through his dress shirt. Beside him, his partner, Sasha, sat rigidly upright. She offered me a tight, fleeting smile that didn't reach her eyes. I ordered a gin and tonic. I needed the bitterness. "So," my father said, clapping his hands together once the waiter had retreated, "this is a fine night. A fine night indeed." He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on Ethan with a predatory sort of pride. He was orchestrating the dinner exactly like a board meeting. Every movement was calculated. Every word was designed to be overheard. "I am proud of you, son," my father said, lifting his wine glass. "Taking the helm of Walker Hale is a heavy responsibility, but you are ready. You have the temperament for it." Ethan stared at his water glass. "Thank you, Dad." My father turned to me. "And Lucy, I am glad you could make it. I know your life in Ridgeway is very busy. It is good of you to take time out of your independent schedule to support your brother." He emphasized the word independent with a subtle sneer, framing my career not as an achievement, but as a selfish abandonment of the family cause. He was signaling to everyone within earshot. See? She left us. She does not deserve the legacy. I took a sip of my drink. I am always happy to support Ethan. I said evenly, I just hope the company is ready for the transition. My father's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. The company has never been stronger. The appetizers arrived, but no one ate. I watched Sasha. She was usually a vibrant, chatty presence, a local school teacher who loved gossip and wine. Tonight, she was vibrating with anxiety. She kept checking her phone, hiding it under the white linen tablecloth, her thumbs scrolling frantically. Is everything okay? Sasha? I asked quietly, leaning in while my father was distracted charming the sommelier. Sasha jumped. She looked at me, her eyes wide. What? Oh, yes, fine. You keep checking your phone, I said. Sasha glanced at Ethan, then back to me. She lowered her voice to a whisper. It is just... Something is happening at the company. Ethan's phone has been blowing up all afternoon. He told me to ignore it, but the alerts keep coming. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Something is happening, before I could press her. My father tapped his knife against his glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the murmur of the restaurant. I would like to propose a toast, he said. Standing up, the room went quiet. People at other tables turned to watch. This was what he wanted, the audience, to Ethan. My father boomed, the future of Walker Hale. May he lead with the same vision and strength that built this family, and to the future. It is looking brighter than ever. Ethan stood up shakily. He raised his glass. To the future, he murmured. As he tipped the glass to his lips, his phone buzzed on the table. It was a loud, aggressive vibration against the wood. Ethan froze. He looked at the screen. His face went from pale to ghostly white in a single second. He set the glass down. The wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth red. Ethan? Sasha whispered. I have to take this, Ethan said. His voice was strangled. Sit down. Ethan, my father commanded. His smile fixed, but his voice dropping to a warning growl. We are in the middle of dinner. I can't, Ethan said. He didn't look at Dad. He looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. I really can't. He turned and practically ran toward the patio doors that led to the smoking terrace. The silence at the table was deafening. My father laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The burden of command, he said to the room at large, always on call. He sat down and aggressively cut into his steak. I stood up. Lucy, sit, my father said. I am just going to check on him, I said. Let him handle it, my father snapped. He is the CEO now. That is exactly why I'm checking on him. I said. I walked away before he could argue. I pushed through the heavy glass doors onto the terrace. The air outside was cold and smelled of rain. The terrace was empty except for Ethan, who was pacing back and forth near the railing. The phone pressed to his ear. They can't do that, Ethan was saying. His voice was high, edging on hysteria. We have a contract. We have a signed agreement. I stepped into the shadows of a large potted cypress tree. I wanted to hear this. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Frozen? Ethan shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, looking around wildly. What do you mean, frozen? We have payroll on Friday. If the operating account is locked, we default on the revolver loan. You know that. Another pause. I don't care what the audit said, Ethan hissed. He grabbed his hair with his free hand. Please, listen to me. Just release the tranche. Just the operating expenses. We can discuss the rest next week. Silence. Then Ethan let out a sound that was half sob, half groan. They hung up. He whispered to the empty air. He dropped his hand, the phone dangling loosely. He leaned over the railing, looking like he might be sick. I stepped out of the shadows. Who hung up? Ethan? He spun around. Lucy. Who hung up? I repeated. Walking toward him, he stared at me, his chest heaving. It doesn't matter. Go back inside. I'm not going back inside. I said, I heard you. Ethan, frozen accounts. Payroll default. Who was on the phone? Ethan slumped against the railing. It was the bank. The bank doesn't freeze accounts on a Saturday night unless something catastrophic happens. I said, It wasn't the bank, Ethan admitted. His voice barely audible. It was the liaison. For the partner, the silent partner. I said, The one who put in $5.1 million. Ethan's head snapped up. How do you know about that? I know enough. I said, I know Dad is rushing this inheritance through because the partner is losing patience. So tell me the truth. What just happened? Ethan looked at the closed doors of the restaurant, where our father was eating steak and pretending to be a king. They pulled it. Ethan said. The words fell out of him like stones. The silent partner. They exercised a clause in the side letter. They paused all funding effective immediately. Why? I asked. Because of the audit, Ethan said. They claim we breached a covenant. Something about debt-to-equity ratios. I don't know. Lucy, I didn't write the deal. Dad did. I stared at him. If they pull the funding. What happens to the company? We collapse, Ethan said simply. The $5 million wasn't just investment capital. It was the liquidity backing our entire line of credit. Without it, the bank calls our loans. We are insolvent within 30 days. My mind raced. This wasn't just a bad quarter. This was a death spiral. Does Dad know? I asked. Ethan laughed. A wet, miserable sound. Dad knew this morning. He knew there was a risk they would pull out. That is why he called the meeting. That is why he announced the inheritance today. I felt the anger rise up in my throat, hot and choking. He knew the ship was sinking. So he made you the captain? Ethan wiped his face with his sleeve. He nodded. He wanted his name off the controlling interest before the default hit. He wanted to insulate his personal assets. But why? Ethan? I asked, grabbing his arm. Why did you agree to it? Why take the fall? Because he promised he could fix it. Ethan cried. He said if I took the title, it would buy him time to negotiate. He said the partner just wanted a fresh face to blame for the restructuring. He lied to you. I said, he set you up. Ethan pulled away from me. He looked at me with a tragic, devastating clarity. No, Lucy, he said softly. He didn't just set me up. He set you up. Me? I asked. I am out. I am disinherited. Exactly, Ethan said. Why do you think he did that? Why give me the estate right before a financial collapse? I shook my head. I don't know. Because he thinks you won't let me fail alone. Ethan said. His voice broke. He knows you. Lucy, he knows you are smarter than me. And he knows you love me. He figures if I am the one holding the bag, you will step in to help carry it. You will use your own money, your own credit, your own legal connections to save the company, because you couldn't bear to watch me go to prison or lose everything. I stood frozen on the damp terrace. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My father hadn't cut me out because he didn't need me. He had cut me out to force me into servitude. If I had inherited the mess, I might have just liquidated the company and walked away. But if Ethan inherited it, I would fight to the death to save him. I was the cleanup crew, and I wasn't even on the payroll. Go back inside, Ethan said, turning back to the railing. Go back to Ridgeway. Don't let him win. I looked at my brother's curved spine. I looked at the restaurant where my father sat. Believing he had checkmated his own children, I am not going anywhere, I said. I walked back into the restaurant. I sat down at the table. I picked up my fork. Everything all right? My father asked, taking a sip of his wine. Everything is fine, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Ethan just had a minor technical issue. He is handling it. My father smiled. Good. That is what leaders do. I cut into my steak. It tasted like ash. The next morning, the fiction of stability began to crack. Briar Glen was a small town, and small towns metabolize bad news faster than caffeine. By 10 in the morning, the rumor mill was churning. I went to the local coffee shop, the Daily Grind. just to listen. I stood in line behind two men in coveralls with the Walker Hale logo stitched on the pockets. I heard the expansion project is on hold. One of them muttered, "Yeah." The other replied, "They sent the contractors home this morning. Said it was a permitting delay. Permitting my ass." The first one said, "I heard the vendors are demanding cash on delivery now. No more net 30 terms. That means the cash flow is dried up. I bought my coffee and left without making eye contact." The mood in the street had shifted. Yesterday, people looked at the Walker name with envy. Today, they looked at it with suspicion. The smiles were tighter. The waves were hesitant. They smelled blood. I drove straight to the Walker Hale offices. I didn't have a badge. But the security guard, old Miller, had known me since I was 5. He waved me through with a sad smile. "Here to see the new boss?" he asked. Something like that. I said. The office was quiet, but it was a tense quiet. The kind of silence that happens before a thunderstorm. People were typing too fast. Conversation stopped abruptly when I walked by. I went straight to the C-suite. I needed to see the books. I knew I had no legal right to them, but I was banking on the confusion of the transition to slip through. I found Glenn Merritt, the CFO, in the hallway outside my father's office. Glenn was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a boardroom. Perfectly tanned, perfectly groomed, and utterly soulless. "Lucy," he said, smoothing his tie. "What a pleasant surprise." "Hello." "Glenn," I said, "I am here to help Ethan get settled. I wanted to review the preliminary quarterly reports." Glenn smiled. It was a patronizing, slippery smile. "That is very kind of you." "Lucy, but Ethan is in a meeting right now, and as for the reports, well, we are in a bit of a sensitive period. I know about the funding pause." "Glenn," I said. I dropped the bomb casually. Watching his face, his left eye twitched. Just a tiny spasm. "I am not sure what you mean," he said smoothly. "The silent partner." I said, "The 5.1 million. It is frozen. I want to see the damage." Glenn stepped closer, invading my personal space. His cologne was overpowering. "Lucy," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur, "family issues should stay private. You are not an owner. You are not an employee. If you start digging around in things you do not understand, you are going to cause panic, and panic is very expensive." He was threatening me, politely, but clearly. "I am just a concerned sister." "Glenn," I said, "then be concerned from the parking lot." He said, "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a company to run." He turned and walked into his office, closing the door firmly. I stood there, fuming. I needed access. I needed someone inside who wasn't bought and paid for by my father. "Lucy?" I turned. Standing by the copier was Tessa Lang. I remembered Tessa. She was a mid-level finance manager, a quiet woman who had started at the company 3 years ago. She always looked like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Hi, Tessa," I said. She looked around to make sure the hallway was empty, then gestured for me to follow her. We walked into a small break room. She closed the door. "I heard what you said to Glenn," she whispered. "About the funding. Is it true?" I asked. Tessa nodded. She looked terrified. "It is worse than frozen. They sent a demand letter this morning. They want a full audit of the collateral assets." "Collateral?" I asked. "What collateral?" "I don't know," Tessa said. "I have never seen the full agreement. Only Glenn and your father have access to the master file. But what?" She hesitated, twisting a ring on her finger. "The silent partner. They never appear in official meetings. We have never seen a face, no Zoom calls, no site visits, but their requirements dictate everything. Every hire, every budget cut, every expansion delay. It is like working for a ghost with a leash. A ghost with a leash." The image made me shiver. "Tessa," I said, "I need to see the financials. The real ones, not the ones Glenn polishes for the board. I can't." She said, "My login is restricted, and if they catch me, you don't have to give them to me." I said, "Just tell me where to look." Tessa bit her lip. "Look at the consulting fees," she whispered. "Look for an entity called Silvermap. That is where the money goes." Silvermap. I memorized the name. Thank you. Tessa. She opened the door and peeked out. Be careful. Lucy, this isn't just business. It feels personal. I left the break room and headed for the legal department. I had one last stop. Jim Sterling's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Jim was packing files into a box. Going somewhere? I asked. Jim looked up. He looked tired. Just tidying up. Lucy, what can I do for you? I want the estate documents. Jim, I said, now? I know you have them. Lucy, we discussed this. I walked into the office and closed the door. No, we didn't discuss it. You stalled. I am done waiting. My brother is walking into a trap, and I need to know the dimensions of the cage. Jim sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Lucy, you are not an owner. The estate has not been probated. Nothing is legally transferred yet. Then why did you announce it? I demanded. Why did you stand in that room and tell everyone Ethan was the sole heir if nothing is signed? It was a statement of intent, Jim said, to reassure the stakeholders. It was a lie, I corrected. And if you don't give me those documents, I am going to hire my own counsel and we are going to sue for immediate disclosure based on undue influence and fiduciary breach. Jim went still. You wouldn't do that. It would destroy the stock price. Try me, I said. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head. I can't give you the estate file. Lucy, I really can't. Your father has it under lock and key in his personal safe. I don't even have the master copy. You are the family attorney, I said incredulously. Not on this, Jim said softly. On this, I am just the messenger. He looked at me with something like pity. You should leave. Lucy, before you get stuck here. I walked out of the building into the gray daylight. I felt heavy. My father had compartmentalized everything. The money, the law, the information. He had built a fortress around his secrets. I sat in my car and called Marin. Silvermap. I said when she answered, Does that mean anything to you? Silvermap Consulting? Marin asked. I can run a check. Why? Tessa said that is where the money goes. And the attorney stonewalled me. He claims he doesn't even have the master estate file. That is a lie, Marin said. Or it is the truth, which is scarier. It means your dad is operating outside his own legal counsel. Lucy, you need a lawyer, a real one, not a family friend. I know. I said, You need Naomi Kessler, Marin said. She is in Ridgeway. She specializes in forensic estate litigation. She is sharp. She is discreet. And she hates bullies. Text me her number. I said. I hung up and started the engine. I wasn't going back to Ridgeway to hide. I was going back to arm myself. I drove out of the parking lot, passing the sign that said Walker Hale Industries, Building the Future. Someone had spray-painted a black line through the word Future. I dialed the number Marin sent. Naomi Kessler. A crisp voice answered. Ms. Kessler. I said, My name is Lucy Walker. My father just disinherited me. And I think he did it to cover up a $5 million fraud. I need your help. There was a pause on the line. Then the sound of a pen clicking. Start from the beginning. Ms. Walker. I merged onto the highway. The rain streaking my windshield. I started talking. I told her about the meeting, the dinner, the phone call, the ghost with the leash. By the time I finished, I was crossing the city limits into Ridgeway. Meet me at my office in an hour, Naomi said. Bring everything you have, public records, emails, anything. We are going to tear this estate plan apart until we find the bodies. I hung up. I felt a strange sense of calm. The confusion was gone. The hurt was still there, buried deep, but it was callous now. It was fuel. My father thought he could use me. He thought I was a safety net. He was about to find out that I was a tripwire. Naomi Kessler's office was the antithesis of my father's. Where his was dark wood, leather, and intimidation, hers was glass, steel, and ruthless transparency. It was located on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Ridgeway City, overlooking the harbor. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that kept you awake, and the coffee was strong enough to strip paint. I sat across from her. watching as she navigated through a digital mountain of public filings. Naomi was 40, with sharp features and glasses that she pushed up her nose every time she found a discrepancy. She had been reading for 2 hours without speaking. Finally, she stopped scrolling. She tapped the screen with a manicured fingernail. "Here," she said. I leaned forward. "What is it?" Naomi spun the monitor around. It was a Schedule C filing from 2 years ago for Walker Hale Industries. She pointed to a line item buried under General Administrative Expenses. Consulting fees. Naomi read aloud. Payable to Silvermap Consulting. $250,000. I frowned. We use consultants all the time. Supply chain optimization. HR audits. That doesn't seem unusual. Naomi scrolled down. Look at the frequency. Lucy, it is not a one-time project fee. It is a recurring monthly payment of exactly $20,833 every month for 3 years. I did the math in my head. That is $250,000 a year. And here is the kicker, Naomi said, opening a second window. I ran a search on Silvermap Consulting. No website, no LinkedIn presence, no press releases. The incorporation documents list a registered agent in Delaware and a mailing address here in Ridgeway. In Ridgeway? I asked. Not Briar Glen? Ridgeway, Naomi confirmed. It is a shell. Lucy, a pass-through entity. Walker Hale is bleeding cash into this ghost company. And the board minutes never mention a contract approval for them. I stared at the screen. Silvermap. The name meant nothing to me. Why would Dad pay a shell company? I asked. To move money off the books, Naomi said bluntly. Or to pay someone who doesn't want to be on the payroll. This looks like a retainer, or hush money. Or debt service on a loan that isn't officially recorded. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The $5.1 million. The silent partner. Can we trace who owns Silvermap? I asked. Naomi shook her head. Not easily. It is wrapped in privacy layers. But the payments stopped 3 months ago. I looked up. They stopped? Abruptly. Naomi said, the last payment was in October. Since then. Nothing. October. That was exactly when Ethan said the tension started. That was when the silent partner paused funding. So we stopped paying them. I said slowly, and now they are squeezing us. Or, Naomi said, removing her glasses and looking at me with laser focus. We stopped paying them because we ran out of cash. And now they are calling in the collateral. Lucy, you need those estate documents. If your father pledged estate assets to secure a deal with this entity, and he is now defaulting, that inheritance isn't a gift. It is a liability transfer. I need to ask him. I said. Naomi sighed. He won't tell you. I have to try. I said, I have to look him in the eye. I drove back to Briar Glen that afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that wouldn't break. I went straight to the house, the sprawling Victorian on the hill that locals called the Walker Estate. It looked picturesque from the road, but up close, you could see the peeling paint on the shutters and the overgrown ivy choking the trellis. It was a house that was too big to maintain and too proud to admit it. I found my father in his study. He was drinking scotch. Neat. It was 2 p.m. Lucy, he said, not rising from his leather chair. To what do I owe the pleasure? You were just here yesterday. I stood in the doorway. I didn't want to sit. I wanted to be ready to leave. I want a copy of the estate documents. Dad, I said. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes fixing on me over the rim of the glass. We discussed this. Jim will send them when they are finalized. They are finalized. I said, you announced the transfer. You can't announce a transfer based on a draft. I want to see what Ethan is signing. He set the glass down with a heavy thud. Why? He asked. So you can pick it apart? So you can run to some city lawyer and look for loopholes? So I can understand why you are giving him a sinking ship. I said. His face darkened. It is not a sinking ship. It is a transition period. I know about the funding pause. Dad, I said, I know about the $5.1 million. I know about Silvermap Consulting. The room went deadly silent. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. 1, 2, 3. My father stood up slowly. He walked around the desk. He stopped 3 feet from me. He was still taller than me, still imposing, but for the first time, I saw the lines of exhaustion etched deep into his face. "You have been busy," he said softly. "Tell me the truth." I said, "Is the estate collateral for the silver map deal?" My father let out a short, derisive laugh. "You think you understand business, Lucy. You think because you work in a glass tower and make spreadsheets that you understand how the world works. You don't. You have the luxury of clean hands because I did the dirty work." "What dirty work?" I asked. "Keeping this family afloat," he shouted. The sudden volume made me flinch. "Do you think the factory ran on goodwill? Do you think the expansion paid for itself? I made deals to keep the lights on. I made deals to keep your brother employed and your mother comfortable. And now, when I need unity, when I need my family to stand in a line and hold the wall, you come in here with accusations. I am not accusing you." I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I am asking for the documents. If there is nothing to hide, give them to me." He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "No," he said. "Why not?" "Because you will turn it into a fight," he said. "You always do. You can't help yourself. Lucy, you see a problem and you want to dissect it. But some problems can't be dissected. They have to be endured. Ethan understands that. You never did. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was framing my need for truth as a character flaw. He was painting my questions as aggression. Ethan doesn't understand it." I said, "Ethan is terrified. Ethan does what is necessary." My father said, "Now get out of my office." I stood my ground for 1 second longer. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, a final punctuation mark on our relationship. I needed to see Ethan. I texted him, "Meet me at Cedar Park, the bench by the pond, 20 minutes. He replied instantly, "Okay." Cedar Park was a neutral zone. It was where we used to hide when our parents fought, where we smoked our first cigarettes, where we planned our escapes that never happened. Ethan was already there when I arrived. He was sitting on the bench, staring at the murky water of the duck pond. He was wearing a hoodie, hood up, looking like a teenager trying to disappear. I sat down next to him. "Did you talk to him?" Ethan asked without looking at me. "I did." I said, "He stonewalled me. He played the victim." Ethan nodded. "Classic. Ethan," I said, turning to face him, "I need you to think back. When you signed the papers for the restructuring, or any papers in the last 3 years, did you see the name Silver Map?" Ethan frowned. "Silver Map? No, I don't think so. Did you read what you signed?" I asked gently. Ethan let out a long breath. He rubbed his face with his hands. "Lucy, you know how it is," he said, his voice muffled. He puts a stack of papers in front of me. He says, "Sign here, here, and here. It is just standard compliance. It is just a lease renewal." If I stop to read it, he gets impatient. He starts tapping his foot. He says, "Do you not trust me?" And I just sign it, to make him stop staring at me. I felt a surge of protectiveness. My father had weaponized Ethan's desire to please. "There is a side letter." I said, "Naomi found a reference to it in the footnotes of an old filing, a side letter that overrides board authority." Ethan looked at me. "What does that mean?" "It means there is a contract that exists outside the official company bylaws." I explained, "A contract that gives the silent partner, Silver Map, the power to seize control if certain conditions aren't met. We think Dad pledged the estate assets as a guarantee for that contract." Ethan's face went white. The house, the land, the stock, everything you are about to inherit." Ethan stared at the water. "I signed a guarantee," he whispered. "What?" "About 3 years ago." He said, "Dad brought me a document. He said it was a character statement for a loan. But it was long, it was thick. I asked if I should have Jim read it. Dad said Jim didn't need to see it because it was a private family matter. And you signed it," I said. Ethan nodded. He looked like he was going to cry. "I signed it. Then you might have personally guaranteed the debt." I said, which means if the company defaults, they don't just take the company, they take you. Ethan put his head in his hands. I am so stupid. You aren't stupid, I said fiercely. You were manipulated, but we have to find that document. Ethan, we have to know what the terms are. He won't give it to me, Ethan said. Then we have to find the other party. I said, we have to find Silvermap. I left Ethan at the park. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. I drove back to Ridgeway City. I had the address for Silvermap Consulting from Naomi's search. It was in a nondescript office park on the edge of the city, a place where startups went to die. Suite 4B. I parked my car and walked up to the glass door. The blinds were drawn. There was no logo on the door, just a piece of paper taped to the glass that said, Suite 4B. I tried the handle, locked. I cupped my hands against the glass and peered through a gap in the blinds. The room was empty, not just clean, empty. No desks, no chairs, no computers, just beige carpet and a pile of unopened mail on the floor beneath the mail slot. Can I help you? I jumped. A woman was standing in the doorway of Suite 4A, a dental supply company. She was holding a watering can. I am looking for Silvermap Consulting. I said. The woman snorted. You and everyone else. They are gone? I asked. Cleared out 2 weeks ago. She said, movers came in the middle of the night, fast, like an eviction, or like they were running from something. They left a mess in the hallway. Did you ever see who worked there? I asked. Not really. She said, usually just one guy. Came in once a month, picked up the mail, stayed for an hour, and left. Suit type, drove a nice car, a black sedan. Did you catch a name? No, she said, but he looked serious, not the friendly type. I thanked her and walked back to my car. A dead end. Silvermap was a ghost. They had collected their payments for 3 years and then vanished the moment the money stopped. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. This is Lucy. Ms. Walker. A smooth male voice said, This is Arthur Pike. I am a senior partner at Harrow & Pike Advisory. The name meant nothing to me, but the tone was expensive. Yes, I said. I understand this is short notice. Arthur Pike said, but I was hoping you might have time to stop by our offices this afternoon. We have some matters to discuss regarding recent changes in your family's estate. My grip on the phone tightened. I never contacted you. Mr. Pike, no, you didn't, he said, but we act as advisors for certain interests connected to Walker Hale Industries. We believe a conversation would be mutually beneficial, connected to Walker Hale. Connected to the silent partner. Where are you located? I asked. The Grand Tower on 4th Street, he said. The penthouse. I will be there in 20 minutes. I said, Harrow & Pike was not a law firm. It was a private wealth advisory, which is a polite term for people who manage money for people who have too much of it to manage themselves. The lobby was marble and silence. The receptionist looked like a model. Arthur Pike met me at the elevator. He was a man in his 60s. Wearing a suit that cost more than my car, he had a face that was perfectly pleasant and completely unreadable. Ms. Walker, he said, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. He led me into a corner office with a view of the entire city. He gestured to a chair. Coffee? Water? No, thank you. I said, I want to know why you called me. Arthur Pike sat behind his desk. He folded his hands. We understand there was a meeting yesterday in Briar Glen. He said, a meeting where your father announced a transition of control to your brother. News travels fast. I said, money travels fast. Miss Walker, Pike corrected gently. News just follows it. What is your interest in my family's estate? I asked. Our firm represents a client who holds a significant position in the capital structure of Walker Hale. Pike said, Silvermap. I said, Pike didn't blink. We represent a client. He repeated, this client is concerned about stability. They are concerned that the transition of assets to your brother might trigger complications. Complications like a default? I asked. Pike smiled. It was a shark's smile. Complications like a lack of leadership. Your brother is a fine young man, I am sure, but does he have the fortitude to manage the obligations attached to this inheritance? He was testing me. He was measuring Ethan and finding him wanting. Now he was measuring me. Ethan is capable, I said. Is he? Pike asked. Or is he a placeholder? I leaned forward. Who is your client? Mr. Pike? If they have a claim on the company, they should present it to the board, not call me for a cryptic chat. My client prefers privacy. Pike said, That is the nature of our arrangement, but they are willing to be flexible. If, for example, there was a different structure to the estate. A different structure? If you were to contest the decision, Pike said softly, if you were to assert your rights as a potential heir, our client might look favorably on a leadership team that included more experienced hands, such as yourself. I sat back, stunned. They were offering to back a coup. They wanted me to fight my father and take the company, presumably because they thought I would be a more reliable puppet than Ethan. You want me to sue my family? I said, I want you to consider your options. Pike said, the debt on Walker Hale is substantial, Ms. Walker. If your brother takes the helm and the ship goes down, he goes down with it. Personally, we would hate to see that happen. It was a threat wrapped in a velvet glove. Take the company, or we destroy your brother. I am not interested in a coup. Mr. Pike, I said, standing up. Pike remained seated. Think about it. Ms. Walker, the timeline is tight. You have until the filing on Monday. After that, options become limited. I walked out of the office without looking back. My heart was pounding. This wasn't just a loan. This was a hostile takeover from the inside out. They had my father in a vice, and now they were trying to put me in one too. I needed to talk to the one person who had survived living with Robert Walker for 40 years. I drove to the outskirts of Briar Glen, to the small cottage where my mother, Evelyn, lived. She had moved out of the main house 5 years ago, claiming she wanted to downsize, but everyone knew she just wanted to sleep through the night without hearing my father pacing the halls. She was in the garden, pruning roses in the fading light. She looked frail in her cardigan, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. Lucy, she said, smiling as I opened the gate. I heard you were in town. Hi, Mom. She wiped her hands on her apron and hugged me. She smelled of lavender and soil. I suppose you saw him, she said. Pulling back, I did. I said, and? He cut me out. Mom, he gave it all to Ethan. Evelyn sighed. She didn't look surprised. She walked over to a stone bench and sat down. She patted the spot next to her. Sit, Lucy. I sat. He is afraid, she said quietly. Afraid of what? I asked. Of losing, she said. Your father has never lost at anything. He doesn't know how. When things get out of his control, he rearranges the board. He moves the pieces. He thinks people are pieces. He is destroying Ethan. I said, he is setting him up to take the fall for a debt he can't pay. Evelyn looked at her hands. I know. You know? I asked, shocked. Mom, if you know, why don't you stop him? Stop Robert? She laughed softly. You can't stop a tidal wave. Lucy, you just get out of the way. I learned that a long time ago. He doesn't shout. He doesn't hit. He just rearranges your world until you are standing exactly where he wants you. She looked at me with sad, watery eyes. Do you remember when Ethan was 22? She asked, when he tried to start that tech company in San Francisco. I nodded. It failed in 6 months. It didn't just fail. Evelyn said, Ethan got into trouble. He borrowed money from the wrong people. Gambling debts, business debts. It was bad. Lucy, $200,000. He called us crying. He said he was going to be hurt. I never knew that. I whispered, your father flew out there that night. Evelyn said, he came back the next day with Ethan. The debt was gone, paid in full. Dad paid it? I asked. Evelyn shook her head. We didn't have that kind of cash liquid at the time. The market was down. I asked Robert where the money came from. He wouldn't tell me. He just said a friend helped him out. A friend who believed in the family potential. A friend. But Robert changed after that. Evelyn said. He became obligated. He started taking meetings at odd hours. He started signing contracts he wouldn't show me. I realized then that this didn't start 3 years ago with Silvermap. It started a decade ago. My father had sold a piece of his soul to save Ethan, and now the bill was coming due with interest. The friend was the silent partner. "Mom," I said, taking her hand. Who was the friend? Did he ever say a name? Evelyn hesitated. She looked toward the house, as if the walls had ears. Once, she whispered, "I heard him on the phone late at night. He was angry. He was shouting." He said, "I paid you back. Pike, I paid you back." My blood ran cold. "Pike?" I asked. "Like Harrow and Pike?" "I don't know," Evelyn said. "I just heard the name Pike." I stood up. My legs felt shaky. Arthur Pike wasn't just an advisor. He was the architect. He had bailed Ethan out 10 years ago, and he had been bleeding the company dry ever since, and now he wanted the company itself. "Where are you going?" Evelyn asked, alarmed. "I have to go." "Mom," I said. "Lucy, don't fight him," she pleaded. "You can't win. I am not fighting for the money." "Mom," I said, "I am fighting for my brother." I walked back to my car in the dark. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was terrifying. The estate wasn't an inheritance. It was a transfer of ownership to a debtor. My father was trying to give Ethan the company so that when Pike foreclosed, he would be foreclosing on Ethan, not on Robert Walker. My father was sacrificing his son to save his own legacy. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the rain on the glass. I wasn't going to sue for my share anymore. That was what Pike wanted. He wanted me to fight for the asset so he could use me to oust my father. No, I wasn't going to fight for the asset. I was going to investigate the liability. I was going to find out exactly what that side letter said, and I was going to find a way to break the hold Pike had on my family. Inheriting meant inheriting the debt. I put the car in gear. I wasn't the heir. I was the auditor, and I was going to balance the books. By Wednesday, the slow bleed of Walker Hale Industries had turned into a hemorrhage. It started with a memo sent out at 6 a.m. The subject line was innocuous. Operational efficiency updates. The content was a disaster. The company wasn't announcing layoffs, which would have required legal notice and severance. Instead, they were announcing temporary scheduling adjustments. I read the email on my phone in Naomi's guest conference room. Shift workers were being cut from 40 hours to 24. Salaried managers were being asked to take mandatory furlough days. It was a soft default on payroll, disguised as a strategy. By noon, the vendors had reacted. I heard from a contact at the shipping depot that the steel suppliers were refusing to unload trucks. They were demanding cashier's checks upon delivery. No more net 30 terms, no more credit. The supply chain had frozen because the trust was gone. The rumors in Briar Glen were no longer whispers. They were shouts. People said the SEC was investigating. People said the pension fund was empty. None of it was confirmed. But in a town built on a single factory, fear traveled faster than truth. My phone rang at 2 o'clock. It was my father. I let it ring twice. Staring at the screen, I prepared myself for the aggression, for the commanding tone I had heard in his study. "Hello, Dad, Lucy." His voice was soft, almost gentle. It unnerved me more than his shouting. "I am glad you picked up. What is happening?" "Dad?" I asked. "I heard about the scheduling cuts. It is just a bridge measure," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "Just tightening the belt until the new funding tranche clears. We have to show the partners we are disciplined. The partners, plural." He was still trying to maintain the illusion. "Why are you calling?" I asked. "We have the Briar Glen Charity Gala on Friday night," he said. "You know it is the biggest night of the year for the community. The mayor will be there. The investors, the press." I waited. "I need you there. Lucy," he said, "and I need you to stand with us. I have drafted a short statement. A family unity statement. Just something simple that says, We are all aligned behind Ethan's leadership and the company's direction. It will calm the market. It will stop the rumors. He wanted to use me. He wanted to wrap himself in my credibility because his own was tattered. If the independent, successful daughter stood up and said everything was fine, the banks might back off. I am not signing a statement. Dad, I said, I don't know what the direction is. Lucy, please, he said. The urgency leaked through the cracks in his voice. This isn't about me. It is about the families in this town. If the stock drops another 10%, the covenants trigger. We lose everything. Do it for them. He was holding the town hostage to get my signature. I looked at Naomi across the table. She was listening on speaker. She slashed a finger across her throat. Don't sign. I will come to the gala, I said slowly. Thank you. My father exhaled. But, I added, cutting him off, I have a condition. What condition? His tone sharpened slightly. I will attend, and I will stand on stage, I said, but before I step foot in that ballroom, I want to review the estate framework, the full draft. And I want to review it with my counsel present. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. He was calculating the risk. He needed my face at that gala more than he wanted to keep his secrets. Fine, he said. Come to the office tomorrow morning. Bring your lawyer. But we keep this civil. No interrogations. Civil. I agreed. I hung up. He agreed too fast, Naomi said, taking off her glasses. If he is letting us see the books, it means he has already sanitized them. I know, I said, but it gets us in the door. The next morning, the Walker Hale executive suite felt like a funeral home. The receptionist spoke in hushed tones. The hallways were empty. I walked in with Naomi by my side. She wore a charcoal suit that looked like it was cut from steel. I wore the same black dress I had worn to the dinner. We were not there to make friends. My father met us in the conference room. Jim Sterling was there, looking miserable, and Glenn Merritt, the CFO, who refused to make eye contact with me. On the table sat a single, thick binder bound in navy blue leather, the Walker Estate, draft structure. Thank you for coming, my father said. He gestured to the chairs. Please, review whatever you like. We have nothing to hide. Naomi sat down and opened the binder. I sat next to her, watching my father. He was too relaxed. He was leaning back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. He was confident that whatever was in that binder was harmless. Naomi began to read. She moved fast, her eyes scanning the legalese with practiced speed. She flipped past the preamble, past the beneficiary designations, straight to the asset schedules. She stopped. Mr. Walker, Naomi said, her voice cool. This schedule. A is incomplete, my father smiled. How so? It lists the equity holdings in Walker Hale, Naomi said, but it doesn't list the valuation methodology. And it references a consolidated liability figure without breaking down the individual debt instruments. Where are the loan agreements? They are referenced in the appendix. Jim Sterling said quickly. Naomi flipped to the appendix. It was empty. Just a placeholder page that said, to be provided. This is a storybook. Naomi said, closing the binder. It tells a nice tale about a transfer of wealth, but it leaves out the mortgage on the castle. You are asking my client to endorse a narrative that has no financial grounding. It is a draft. Ms. Kessler, my father said, his voice hardening. The valuations are being updated by the auditors as we speak. Then we can't sign a unity statement. I said. My father turned to me. Lucy, don't be difficult. You wanted to see the structure. Ethan gets the assets. You get a cash buyout over 10 years. It is all there. I stood up. I needed to change the dynamic. He was prepared for a fight over the binder. I needed to look elsewhere. I walked over to the window, looking out at the factory floor below. I could see the machines sitting idle. Where is the side letter? Dad? I asked. What side letter? He asked. The one Ethan signed? I said, turning to face him. The one that guarantees the Silvermap debt. My father's face didn't move, but his knuckles on the armrest turned white. There is no side letter in the estate, because you are keeping it separate. I said. I started walking around the room. I walked past the display case with the awards. I walked past the portrait of my grandfather. I was looking for something I had seen years ago. My father had a habit of keeping his real work close. He didn't trust servers. He trusted steel. In the corner of the room, behind a decorative plant, was a small, waist-high filing cabinet. It wasn't the standard office issue. It was a heavy fireproof safe with a digital lock. I saw my father's eyes dart toward it, just a flicker. "What is in there?" I asked, pointing to the safe. "Personal files," my father said. "Medical records. Nothing to do with the business." I walked closer to it. On top of the safe, sitting innocuously under a stack of magazines, was the spine of another binder. It was thin, black, and unlabeled on the side, but on the front cover, visible because the magazines had shifted, was a white label. I reached out. "Don't touch that," my father barked. He half rose from his chair. I froze. I didn't grab it. I just leaned over and looked at the label. Contingency. S.P. Silent Partner. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Lucy!" my father shouted. I snapped a photo of the binder cover. Then I stepped back, holding my hands up, just looking. "Dad," I said. My father was standing now, his face red. "Get out. The meeting is over." I looked at Naomi. She had seen it too. She closed the navy blue binder and stood up. "I think we have seen enough, Mr. Walker," Naomi said. We walked out. My father didn't follow us. He stayed in the room, guarding his safe, guarding the truth that was sitting right on top of it. We regrouped at a hotel coffee shop down the street. It was safer than the office. "Contingency S," Naomi said, stirring her tea. "That confirms it. He has a separate protocol for the partner, and he panicked when I got near it." I said, "It is not just medical records. That binder contains the real deal." My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was another email from user 77492. The anonymous source. I opened it. The message was longer this time. "He is going to sacrifice Ethan to keep himself clean. The silent partner is not who you think. Look at the date." Attached was a photo. It was a surveillance shot, grainy and black and white. It showed my father walking into a building. I recognized the brass revolving doors immediately. It was the entrance to the Harrow and Pike building in Ridgeway City. My father was shaking hands with a man. The man was Arthur Pike. I zoomed in on the timestamp in the corner of the photo. November 12th, 2024. 2 years ago. "Wait," I said. Showing the phone to Naomi, "Evelyn told me Dad knew Pike from 10 years ago. But look at this. He was meeting with him 2 years ago. That is right before the silver map payment started." Naomi said, "But look at Dad's face." I said, "In the photo, my father wasn't looking at Arthur Pike with fear or deference. He was smiling. He looked conspiratorial. He looked like a partner, not a victim." The text said, "The silent partner is not who you think." I thought the silent partner was a loan shark. I thought it was an enemy. But what if it wasn't? What if the silent partner was an institution that my father had invited in? "Institutional capital," Naomi murmured. "Private equity. If Harrow and Pike is the silent partner, they aren't just lending money, they are buying equity options. They are stripping the assets. And Dad is helping them?" I asked. "Or he thinks he is using them," Naomi said. "He thinks he can ride the tiger, but now the tiger is hungry." I stood up. "I need to find Ethan. I found my brother in his office. He was sitting in the dark, the blinds drawn. His desk was covered in paper cups and unopened mail. "Ethan," I said, closing the door. He looked up. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 days. "They want me to sign it." "Lucy," he whispered. "Sign what?" "The restructuring plan," he said. He pushed a document across the desk toward me. I picked it up. It was a debt forbearance agreement. I read the first page. It was a nightmare. In exchange for a 6-month extension on the credit lines, the company agreed to a change of control clause, and it assigned personal surety to the CEO for any shortfall in collateral. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. If you sign this, and the company fails, you owe them the money. Personally, you will be bankrupt for the rest of your life. I know, Ethan said. He put his head on the desk, but Dad says it is the only way. He says if I don't sign it by Monday, they foreclose on Tuesday. He says I have to be the hero. He isn't asking you to be a hero. Ethan, I said, slamming the document down, he is asking you to be a martyr. He is putting the liability on you so that when the ship sinks, he can walk away with his pension and his reputation intact. Ethan looked up. Tears were streaming down his face. But he is Dad. Lucy, he wouldn't do that. He promised me. He said the expansion would pay for it. The expansion is dead, I shouted. There is no money coming in. Ethan sobbed. Then what do I do? If I don't sign, the company dies. If I do sign, I die. You don't sign, I said firmly. You let it default. I can't, Ethan whispered. Why not? Because of the lake house, he said. I froze. The lake house? Ethan wiped his nose. It was pathetic and heartbreaking. Dad told me. The $5.1 million. It wasn't just a loan against the business. It was cross-collateralized. With what? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. With the personal estate. Ethan said, the lake house, the land parcels on the ridge, even Mom's cottage. It is all tied to the silver map note. I sat down heavily in the chair opposite him. That was the leverage. That was why my father was so desperate for the family unity. The $5.1 million wasn't just investment money. It was a mortgage on our childhood. If the company defaulted, we didn't just lose the factory. We lost the home where we grew up. We lost the cottage where Mom lived. We lost the land my grandfather bought, and my father had done it without telling anyone. He gambled everything. I whispered. Ethan nodded. And now he needs me to take the debt onto my name so that the foreclosure hits me, not the estate trust. He thinks if I take the personal liability, he can negotiate a settlement to save the houses. He is lying to you. Ethan, I said, if you sign that, Pike will take the houses anyway, and they will take your future too. I grabbed the forbearance agreement. Don't sign this. I said, do not sign this. I walked out of his office with the document. I needed to see Tessa. I met Tessa Lang in the parking lot of the grocery store on the edge of town. It was raining again. We sat in her car. She looked terrified. I saw Glenn watching me today. Tessa said, he knows I talked to you. You are safe. I said, we will protect you. But I need to know about the collateral. Tessa nodded. She pulled a folder from her bag. I printed this before they locked me out. She said, it is the valuation schedule for the Silver Map loan. I opened it. There it was. Asset Group B, real property. Listed clearly were the deed numbers for the Walker estate, the lake house, and 300 acres of undeveloped land. The valuation date was 3 years ago. Tessa pointed to a line at the bottom. Look at the LTV ratio, she said. Loan to value. It is 110%. I stared at the number. What does that mean? It means your father didn't just borrow against the land. Tessa said, he over-leveraged it. He borrowed more than the land was worth, based on projected future value. The silent partner gave him the money. But they took a super priority lien, meaning they own it. Tessa said, technically, they have owned it for 3 years. Your father has just been renting it back from them. I closed the folder. My father wasn't a tycoon. He was a tenant. He had sold the family legacy 3 years ago to pay for his ambition, or his mistakes, or his debts to Pike, and now he was trying to shuffle the paperwork so that when the eviction notice came, it would be addressed to Ethan Walker. Not Robert Walker. Inheritance? It was a joke. He was bequeathing a foreclosure. I looked at Tessa. Can you testify to this? If I have to, she whispered. But Lucy, if this comes out, the company is finished. Fraud on this scale. The banks will liquidate immediately. I know. I said. I got out of her car and ran back to mine. The rain soaked my dress. I called Naomi. We have a problem. I said. It is cross-collateralized. The houses are gone, I figured. Naomi said. That is the only reason he would be this desperate. I am going to the gala. I said, "What?" Naomi sounded shocked. "Lucy, no, you can't support him. I am not going to support him." I said, "I am going to buy us time, but I need a bigger gun. I need someone who can take apart the silver map payments and prove where the money actually went. Because if Dad over-leveraged the land, that money went somewhere. And I don't think it all went into the factory. You want a forensic accountant?" Naomi said, "I want the best one." I said, "Doctor, Simon Red." Naomi said, "He is expensive, and he is scary. He used to work for the Treasury Department tracking cartel money." "Hire him," I said. I drove back to the hotel. I sat on the bed and looked at the photo of the contingency binder. My father had built a trap for his own son. He was going to let Ethan sign his life away on Monday morning to save his own pride. The gala was tomorrow night. My father wanted a show of unity. I would give him a show, but it wouldn't be the one he wrote. I pulled out my laptop. I started typing. I wasn't writing a unity statement. I was writing a timeline. From the moment the debt was paid 10 years ago to the moment the Silver Map Shell Company was formed, I was going to build a case, and I was going to do it quietly, because if I screamed now, my father would just close ranks. He would force Ethan to sign. He would burn the evidence. I had to be the silent partner now. I turned off the light. The darkness of the hotel room felt heavy, but for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt cold. My father had taught me well. You don't shout. You just rearrange the world. I was about to rearrange his doctor. Simon Red did not look like an accountant. He looked like a man who had spent too much time in rooms where people were interrogated. He was bald, with a scar running through his left eyebrow, and he sat in Naomi's conference room with a stillness that was unnerving. He had been with the documents for 6 hours. Naomi had called in favors to get him the raw data dump we had scraped from public filings, the snippets Tessa had provided, and the leaked ledger photo. I sat across from him, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. Naomi stood by the window, watching the rain batter Ridgeway City. "It is a carousel, Doctor," Red said finally. His voice was gravel. I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" He turned his laptop around. On the screen was a diagram. It looked like a tangled web of arrows, all pointing back to where they started. "Here is Walker Hale Industries." "Doctor," Red said, pointing to a blue circle. "Money leaves the company marked as consulting fees to Silvermap. We know that. But look where it goes next." He tapped a gray circle. "Silvermap isn't holding the cash. Within 48 hours of receipt, Silvermap donates 80% of that money to 3 specific nonprofit organizations: the Briar Glen Heritage Fund, the Coastal Preservation Trust, and the Walker Family Foundation, my father's charities." I whispered, "Exactly." "Doctor," Red said, "and do you know what those charities do with the money? They hire vendors for community improvement projects. And who are those vendors?" He pointed to a cluster of small LLCs, subsidiaries of Walker Hale. "Doctor," Red said, "construction arms, maintenance crews, logistics support. The money goes out as an expense, washes through the charities to buy goodwill and tax breaks, and comes back into the company as service revenue." I stared at the screen. It was genius, and it was illegal. "He is inflating revenue," I said. "He is creating it out of thin air." "Doctor," Red corrected, "he is taking a loan from the silent partner, paying it to a shell company, and cycling it back in to make the company look profitable. It keeps the EBITDA high enough to satisfy the bank covenants, but the actual cash is being eaten up by transaction fees and interest. The company is cannibalizing itself to look healthy, and the community loves him for it." Naomi added grimly, "Look at the donations. He is using the debt to buy his reputation." I felt sick. The park benches with our name on them, the new wing of the library. It was all paid for with money that was slowly strangling the business. "This explains the urgency." "Doctor," Red said, "the cycle only works as long as the cash keeps moving. If the silent partner pauses funding, which they did, the revenue stops coming in. The ratios crash. The banks call the loans. He is insolvent." I said, "He has been insolvent for years." "Doctor," Red closed his laptop. Technically, yes. But as long as he controls the narrative, he can keep the balls in the air. That is why he needs your brother to take the helm. He needs a fresh signature to restart the cycle. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray city. Tonight is the gala, I said. Naomi looked at me. You are still going? I have to, I said. He thinks he is the ringmaster. I need to go and see who else is holding a whip. The Briar Glen Charity Gala was held in the ballroom of the Grand Hotel. It was a room of crystal chandeliers, gold leaf, and old money, or at least, the appearance of old money. I arrived 20 minutes late. I wore a dress of midnight blue silk, high-necked and long-sleeved. It was severe. It was elegant. I pulled my hair back tight. I wasn't there to be the daughter he could parade. I was there to be the statue he couldn't move. The room was crowded. I saw the faces of people I had known my whole life, the mayor, the high school principal, the owners of the local car dealerships. They were all drinking champagne and toasting the Walker name, unaware that the foundation of their town was built on a sinkhole. I moved through the crowd. I didn't hide. I smiled just enough to be polite, but not enough to be warm. Lucy! I turned. It was Silas Vance, one of the board members who had been at the ambush meeting. He was holding a scotch, his face flushed. Mr. Vance, I said. Good to see you, he said, swaying slightly. We were worried you might, well, stay away. After the news, I am here for the family, I said smoothly. Good, good. Silas leaned in, his breath heavy with alcohol. It is a bold move, giving it to Ethan. Risky, but necessary. Why necessary? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Silas winked. The partner hates surprises. You know how it is. They wanted clarity on the succession before the quarter closed. Robert had to give them a name. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. The partner hates surprises. So the inheritance wasn't about Ethan's readiness. It was a demand. The silent partner had ordered a name, and my father had served one up. Does the partner ever come to these things? I asked innocently. Silas laughed. God, no, we don't see them. We just see the term sheets. Scary paperwork. Lucy, ironclad. But hey, that is the cost of doing business, right? He patted my shoulder and drifted away. I stood there, processing. My father wasn't the CEO. He was a middle manager for a ghost. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. My father walked out to the podium. He looked magnificent in his tuxedo. He looked like the patriarch of the century. The applause was thunderous. Thank you, he said, raising his hands. He gave a speech about resilience, about the history of Briar Glen. He spoke about the challenges of the modern economy and the strength of tradition. It was a beautiful lie. And tonight, he said, his voice swelling with emotion, I want to acknowledge my children, my son, Ethan, who is stepping up to lead us into the future, and my daughter, Lucy. The spotlight swept the room and landed on me. I didn't flinch. I stood perfectly still, my face a mask. Lucy has built her own success in the city, my father said, beaming at me. But she is here tonight because she knows that no matter how far you go, family is the anchor. She is a team player. We are stronger together. The room applauded. He was weaving me into his narrative. He was using my presence to validate his fraud. I gave a small, stiff nod. The spotlight moved away. 10 minutes later, as the band started playing, I felt a hand on my elbow. It was my father. Smile, Lucy. He hissed in my ear. You look like you are at a funeral. Maybe I am, I said, pulling my arm away. He steered me toward a quiet corner near the kitchen doors. His smile dropped instantly. Did you sign the unity statement? He asked. No, why not? Because the estate is a shell game. Dad, I said, I saw the schedule. I know about the circular payments. I know about the charities. His eyes narrowed. You have been talking to someone. I have been doing math. I said, you are taking loans from the silent partner, washing them through Silvermap, donating them to your own foundation, and hiring your own company to do the work. It is money laundering. Dad, just with better PR. It is cash flow management. he snapped. Everyone does it. It is how you bridge the gap between contracts. You are bridging a canyon with a toothpick, I said, and now you want Ethan to walk out on it. He stepped closer, invading my space. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. Stop digging. Lucy, I mean it. You think you are being righteous, but you are just being dangerous. You are going to spook the investors. The investors? I asked. Or Pike? He flinched at the name. You need to start helping, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. You are part of this family. You benefited from this money. Your college tuition? Your apartment deposit? Where do you think that came from? It came from the company. Don't you dare, I said. I paid you back for the deposit. It is all the same pot, he said. Now, you are going to go out there. You are going to dance with your brother, and you are going to look happy, because if this deal collapses. Lucy, it doesn't just hurt me. It destroys everything. Your mother's house, the pension fund, the whole damn town. He reached out and smoothed a stray hair from my face. His hand lingered on my cheek. It was a gesture of affection, but it felt like a threat. Be a good daughter, he whispered. I looked at him. I saw the desperation behind the control. He was terrified. I will dance, I said, but I'm not signing. I walked away from him. I found Ethan. He looked like a ghost in a tuxedo. We danced one waltz. He was trembling the whole time. He knows, Ethan whispered. He knows you are circling. Good, I said. The next morning, I met Naomi at a diner on the highway. She had her laptop open. I found the structure. She said without preamble. She turned the screen to me. It was a corporate genealogy chart for Harrow Pike. Harrow Pike isn't the lender, Naomi said. They are the servicer. The actual capital comes from a holding company called Apex Distressed Assets 7. Apex. I read, it is a Cayman Islands entity, Naomi said. And here's the terrifying part. Apex is an algorithm. What? It is a quantitative fund, Naomi explained. They buy distressed debt. Companies like Walker Hale that have assets but cash flow problems. They lend money at high interest with massive collateral. And the contracts are managed by software. If a covenant is breached, like the debt-to-equity ratio, the software triggers a default notice automatically. There is no human being to negotiate with. So when Ethan called and begged them, I said, he was talking to a clerk who was looking at a red light on a screen. Naomi said, you can't appeal to their mercy. Lucy, they don't have any. It is a machine designed to strip assets, and my father invited them in. I said, he probably thought he could outsmart the algorithm. Naomi said, he thought he could grow his way out of the debt before the trap snapped. He was wrong. I rubbed my temples. So how do we fight a machine? We find the human error, Naomi said. The contract was written by lawyers. Lawyers make mistakes. We need the full agreement. I don't have it, I said. Then we need to find the paper trail that led to it. Naomi said, I thought about my mother, Evelyn Walker, the woman who stayed quiet. I am going to the cottage. I said, my mother was out grocery shopping when I arrived. I had a key. I let myself in. The cottage was cozy, cluttered with books and knickknacks. It felt safe, which made my mission feel like a violation. I went to the guest room, which she used for storage. There were boxes stacked in the closet. Taxes, 1990 to 2000. Ethan's schoolwork, Christmas decorations. I found a box labeled Robert, Old Office. I opened it. It smelled of dust and old paper. It was mostly junk. Old calendars, greeting cards. But at the bottom, I found a manila envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a letter. Handwritten. My father's handwriting. It was dated 10 years ago. Dear Arthur, I appreciate the lifeline. I understand the terms of the bridge note are aggressive, but I have no choice. I will place the deeds in escrow as requested. I trust in the partner's discretion regarding the timeline. Please, do not let Evelyn know the extent of the lien. Sincerely, Robert. I held the paper up to the light, the partner's discretion. Do not let Evelyn know. He sounded so small, so defeated. Even 10 years ago. He was begging. I took a picture of the letter. I put it back in the box. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Lucy, you need to come to the office. Now. It is Sunday. Nobody is here. I found something. I drove to the office in record time. Ethan was in the server room, of all places. He was sitting on the floor with a laptop plugged into the mainframe. What are you doing? I asked. I remembered something. Ethan said. He looked manic. Years ago, Dad told me never to open the Archive B folder on the shared drive. He said it was corrupted files. And I just guessed the password. Ethan said, it was your birthday. My stomach twisted. Look, Ethan said. He pointed to the screen. It was an email chain from 3 years ago, between my father and an email address. complianceapex-assets.com. Subject, extension request. My father. I can offer further assurances. If the restructuring is approved, I will designate the estate transition to occur prior to the fiscal cliff. This will ensure the collateral is consolidated under a single signatory. Apex. Confirmed. Ensure the successor is prepared to assume personal guarantee. My father. He understands the legacy. I read the words 3 times. Dad wasn't protecting the estate. He was offering the estate as a sweetener to get an extension on his loan. He was trading us like cattle. He sold me. Ethan whispered. He literally sold me. I sat down on the floor next to him. I put my arm around his shoulders. He was shaking. We have him. Ethan, I said, this proves he negotiated in bad faith. He knew the inheritance was a liability trap. What do we do? Ethan asked. We blow it up. I said. Just then, my phone rang. It was Tessa. She was crying. Lucy? They locked me out. What happened? I asked. Standing up, I tried to download the Silvermap ledger again. Tessa sobbed. The system flagged it. Glenn called me. He said I am suspended pending an investigation for corporate espionage. He said they are going to sue me. Listen to me. Tessa, I said, my voice steady. Go home. Do not talk to Glenn. Do not talk to anyone. I am having Naomi call you in 5 minutes. We are going to file for whistleblower protection. Whistleblower? Tessa asked. You aren't a spy. I said, you are reporting financial fraud. You are protected by federal law, but you have to let Naomi handle it. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered. I hung up and called Naomi. Handle Tessa. I said, they caught her. I am on it. Naomi said, Lucy, did you find anything? I found the smoking gun. I said, Dad promised the inheritance to the algorithm 3 years ago. Monday morning, the day of the filing, my father called a meeting at the house at 8 a.m. Me and Ethan. We sat in the living room. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a gray, washed-out light. My father looked energized. He had his game face on. Big day, he said, rubbing his hands together. We signed the papers at noon. Then we announced the transition. He placed a document on the coffee table. But first, he said, looking at me, we need to clear the decks. He slid the document toward me. What is this? I asked. A gift, he said. I picked it up. It was a deed transfer. For the cottage. He was giving me Mom's house. And this, he said, sliding a second paper. It was a non-disparagement and settlement agreement. It stated that in exchange for the cottage, I waived all rights to contest the estate, all rights to review company financials, and agreed to never speak publicly about the family business. It is a clean break. Lucy, my father said, you get the cottage, free and clear. Ethan gets the company. Everyone wins. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the floor. His jaw set. You are bribing me, I said. I am being generous, my father said. You get an asset worth $400,000 just for signing your name. I looked at the non-disparagement agreement. Why is this clause here? I asked. Which one? The one about public contest. I said. I had seen a similar clause in the notes Tessa sent. Immediate repayment if control changes are contested publicly. My father stiffened. It is standard language. No, I said, it is the trigger. Isn't it? The Apex contract says if there is a legal fight over the estate, the loan gets called immediately. That is why you are so afraid of me suing. You aren't afraid of losing the lawsuit. You are afraid of the lawsuit existing. My father stood up. You are talking nonsense. I stood up too. I dropped the papers on the table. I am not signing. Dad. His face turned a color I had never seen before, a deep, bruised purple. You have to sign, he shouted. He lost control. The mask slipped. You selfish little... Do you have any idea what is at stake? If you don't sign, the deal falls apart. Why are you so afraid of a courtroom? I asked quietly. He stopped. His chest was heaving. Because there is no courtroom, he yelled. There is no judge. There is just a contract that eats us alive if we blink. I am trying to save you. You aren't trying to save us, I said. You are trying to feed Ethan to the beast so it doesn't eat you. I turned to Ethan. Come on. Ethan stood up. He looked at our father. I am not signing the restructuring. Dad, Ethan said. My father looked like he had been shot. Ethan, son, don't call me son, Ethan said. You sold me. We walked out of the house. My father screamed after us. Incoherent threats about legacy and ruin. We got into my car. He is going to file the estate papers anyway, Ethan said. He has power of attorney over the company until I officially decline. Then we have to stop him. I said, how? If we sue, we trigger the default. The company collapses. We don't sue to contest the will. I said, I pulled out my phone and dialed Naomi. Do it. I said to her. Do what? Ethan asked. We are filing a demand for an independent audit based on shareholder rights. I said, we aren't fighting the inheritance. We are fighting the valuation. It is a needle thread. I told him, we are asking a judge to freeze the transfer pending a clarification of assets. It isn't a contest of control. It is a request for information. Will it work? Ethan asked. I don't know. I said, but it will force the silent partner to show their face. We drove toward the courthouse. The deadline was noon. It was 10:30. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the heir. I was the demolition expert. And I was about to cut the red wire. The courthouse clock tower struck noon as Naomi handed the folder to the clerk. It was not a dramatic moment. There were no reporters, no cameras, and no shouting. It was just the quiet thud of a date stamp hitting paper. We did not file a contest of the will. We did not sue for control. We filed a motion for clarification of asset valuation under the state's minority shareholder protection statutes. It was a boring, bureaucratic title for a document that was essentially a bomb. We are asking for a pause, Naomi explained to the clerk, who looked like she wanted to be at lunch. We are not disputing the transfer of the estate. We are simply asserting that as a potential beneficiary of the residual trust, my client has a fiduciary right to know the accurate value of the assets being transferred, particularly regarding encumbrances held by third-party entities. The clerk blinked. So, you want to see the receipts? We want to see the debt. Naomi corrected. By filing for information rather than control, we sidestepped the trigger clause in the Apex contract. We weren't fighting the change of command. We were just asking to see the map before the ship set sail. It was a legal needle thread, precise and dangerous. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter. But I knew the feeling wouldn't last. We had just lit a fuse. The explosion wasn't going to happen in a courtroom. It was going to happen at home. The reaction was immediate. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. It wasn't my father. It was his executive assistant, a woman named Karen who had sent me birthday cards for 20 years. Her voice was shaking. Lucy, she said, your father is calling a mandatory family meeting at the lake house. Tonight, 6 o'clock, the lake house. He was raising the stakes. The office was business. The house was authority. But the lake house was memory. It was where we spent every summer. It was the heart of the Walker family myth. He wanted us on his turf, surrounded by nostalgia, where he felt most like a patriarch. I picked up Ethan on the way. He sat in the passenger seat of my car, staring out the window. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. He is going to kill us, Ethan said. He can't kill us, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. We have the leverage now. He can't finalize the transfer while the motion is pending. The judge put a 48-hour hold on the estate execution. Ethan laughed, a dry rattling sound. You don't get it, Lucy. You think this is a legal battle. To him, it is a mutiny. We pulled into the long gravel driveway as the sun was setting over the water. The lake house looked beautiful. A sprawling timber frame structure nestled in the pines. Lights were blazing in every window. It looked like a postcard. We walked inside. My father was standing by the massive stone fireplace. My mother was sitting on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, looking at the floor. Jim Sterling stood in the corner, looking like he wanted to vanish. Sit down, my father said. His voice wasn't loud. It was cold. Absolute zero. We sat. I took the armchair opposite him. Ethan sat next to Mom. Do you know what you have done? My father asked, looking directly at me. I filed a motion. Dad, I said, I want to see the real books. You froze the transfer. He said, the bank called me 10 minutes ago. They saw the filing. They are spooked. Lucy, they are asking if the family is in litigation. I told you. I said, I won't sign blindly. My father walked over to the window. He looked out at the dark lake. I have 300 employees, he said softly. 300 families in this town who depend on Walker Hale to put food on their tables. I have vendors who have been with us for 40 years. I have a pension fund that supports retirees who built this company with their bare hands. He turned around. His eyes were wet. He was doing it. He was weaponizing his own failure. And you, he said, pointing a shaking finger at me, you are risking all of them. For what? For pride? Because you felt left out? You are going to crash this company and put 300 people on the unemployment line because you couldn't stand to let your brother have the chair. It was a masterclass in guilt. He wasn't the fraudster. I was the saboteur. I am not doing this for pride. I said, I am doing it because the company is already crashed. Dad, you are just hiding the wreckage. How dare you? He whispered. You are creating instability, he shouted, his voice suddenly rising to a roar. You are the one causing the panic. If you had just smiled and signed the paper, the funding would have cleared tomorrow. We would be safe. But you had to dig. You had to be the smartest person in the room. And now you are going to be the reason this family loses everything. I felt the old shame prickle at my neck, the childhood instinct to apologize, to fix it, to be the good girl. But then I looked at Ethan. He was shaking. He was gripping his knees so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like he was about to shatter. Tell him, Ethan, I said softly. My father snapped his head toward Ethan. Tell me what? That you are too weak to lead? That you let your sister fight your battles? Ethan stood up. He didn't look heroic. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had been carrying a stone for 10 years and just couldn't take another step. I didn't read them. Ethan said. What? My father asked. The papers, Ethan said. His voice was small, but it was steady. 3 years ago, the guarantee, the silver map restructuring. I didn't read them. My father scoffed. Of course you did. You signed them. I signed them because you told me to, Ethan yelled. The sound echoed off the high timber ceiling. My mother flinched. You put them in front of me and told me it was routine, Ethan continued, tears spilling down his face. You told me I didn't need to read them because you had handled it. You told me to trust you, and I did. I trusted you because you are my father. He wiped his face with his sleeve. And you used that trust to handcuff me to a bomb. Ethan said, you knew the silent partner was going to call the debt. You knew the timing. You timed the inheritance to match the default notice so that my name would be on the letterhead when the sheriff came to lock the doors. Ethan, my father warned, stepping forward. No. Ethan stepped back. I am done. Dad, I am not the CEO. I am the scapegoat, and I am not doing it anymore. The room fell silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. My father looked at Ethan with a mix of shock and disdain. He couldn't believe his creation was speaking back. You are ungrateful. My father spat. I did everything for you. I paid your debts. I covered your mistakes. You paid my debts with money you borrowed from a loan shark," Ethan screamed back. "And now you are paying the loan shark with my life." My father turned away. He couldn't look at him. He looked at Jim Sterling. "Fix this. Jim," my father said. "Get the motion dismissed." "I can't." "Robert." Jim said quietly, "It is filed. It is public record now." My father looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. "You did this," he said. "You poisoned him." I stood up. I walked over to him. "I didn't poison him." "Dad," I said, "I just woke him up." We left the lake house in silence. My mother didn't say a word, but as we walked out, she squeezed my hand. It was a quick, desperate pressure. I dropped Ethan at his apartment. He looked like a shell, but he also looked free. I went back to the hotel. Naomi was waiting in the lobby. She looked grim. We got a call. She said, "From who?" "Arthur Pike," she said. "Or rather, the legal team representing the entity managed by Harrow and Pike." "What do they want?" I asked. "They want to settle," Naomi said. I frowned. "Settle the motion?" "Settle you," Naomi said. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a term sheet. Short, brutal, offer of settlement. Recipient: Lucy Walker. Amount: $2 million. Conditions: immediate withdrawal of all motions, irrevocable waiver of all estate claims, execution of a permanent confidentiality agreement. I stared at the number, $2 million. It was enough money to pay off my mortgage. It was enough to start my own firm. It was enough to walk away from Briar Glen and never think about my father or his failing company again. "They are scared," Naomi said. "Why?" I asked. "It is pocket change to a fund like Apex." "Because you are peeking behind the curtain," Naomi said. "Algorithms hate sunlight. They operate on speed and obscurity. If this goes to a discovery phase, if we get a forensic audit of their lending practices, it could expose their entire model. They don't just do this to Walker Hale. They probably do it to 100 family companies a year. They don't want a precedent." I looked at the paper. $2 million to be quiet. To let Ethan take the fall. To let my father keep his myth. I could take it. I thought I could leave. Ethan is an adult. He signed the papers. Maybe I should just save myself. The thought was seductive. It tasted like freedom. But then I thought about the text message. User 77492. The anonymous source. "Your father will sacrifice Ethan to keep himself clean." If I took the money, I wasn't just leaving, I was joining them. I would be another line item in the corruption. "Tell them no," I said. Naomi smiled. She looked proud. "I already did." She said, "I told them you aren't for sale. But Lucy, they are going to come harder now. This was the carrot. Next comes the stick." I didn't sleep that night. At 7 a.m, I drove to the cottage. I needed to see my mother. She was in the kitchen, making tea. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "I am sorry about last night, Mom," I said. She turned around. She didn't look angry. She looked resigned. "I knew," she said softly. "You knew what?" "I knew he was leveraging the house," she said. "I didn't know the details. I didn't know about Silvermap. But I knew the money had to come from somewhere. We were living too well for a company that was struggling. The galas, the new cars, the renovations. It didn't add up." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because I was afraid," she said. She sat down at the table. "I was afraid of what would happen if the music stopped. I was afraid he would fall apart. Your father, his entire identity is being the provider. If you take that away, there is nothing left. So you let him lie." I said, "I let him keep the peace." She corrected, or what I thought was peace. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear. "But it wasn't peace," she said. "It was just a slow surrender. And I watched him drag Ethan into it. I watched him mold your brother into someone who couldn't say no." She reached out and took my hand. "You were right to do it." "Lucy," she said. I blinked, surprised. "You were right to burn it down," she said. "The myth, the legacy, it is all rot. I stayed quiet to protect the family. But I realized last night, there is no family left to protect. Just a business arrangement. She squeezed my hand. Ethan spoke up because you were there. She said, you gave him a spine. Don't stop now. If you have the truth, use it. Even if it hurts him, even if it destroys the company, the truth is the only thing that can save Ethan now. It was the validation I had waited 33 years to hear. My mother, the peacemaker, was handing me a sword. I went to the main house at 10 o'clock. I didn't call first. I found my father in his study. He was packing a box, not with files, but with personal items, a framed photo of him and the governor, his gold letter opener. He looked up when I entered. He looked older. The vitality from the gala was gone. Are you happy? He asked. The bank suspended the line of credit this morning. They cited governance uncertainty. We can't make payroll on Friday. I closed the door. I know about the circular payments. Dad, I said, he froze. I know about the donations to the foundation that flow back into the subsidiaries. I continued. I know about the inflated service revenue. I have the charts. I have the dates. He put the letter opener down. And I know about the collateral. I said, I know the lake house and the land are already gone. You signed them over 3 years ago. You aren't the owner. You are a squatter. My father sat down heavily in his chair. He didn't shout. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with a weary, patronizing expression. You make it sound so criminal. He said, It is criminal. I said, It is fraud. It was survival. He snapped. The market changed. Lucy, manufacturing in this country, it is a dying animal. I was trying to keep it alive. I was trying to buy time until we could pivot. So you sold your soul to Apex. I said, They offered a bridge. He said, They offered a noose, I countered, and you put your head in it. And when it got too tight, you tried to switch heads. You tried to swap yours for Ethan's. I did it to keep the family safe. He insisted. He actually believed it. That was the horror of it. He had convinced himself that sacrificing his son was an act of protection. If I am the CEO, the personal liability ruins me. If Ethan is the CEO, he takes the hit. But I still have my assets. I can use those assets to bail him out later. I was playing the long game. You were protecting your own skin. I said. He stood up. He walked over to a safe. Not the one in the office, but a wall safe behind a painting. He spun the dial. He pulled out a document. You think you know everything, he said. You think you have solved the puzzle, but you are missing the final piece. He threw the document on the desk. Read it, he said. I picked it up. It was the original master credit facility agreement with Apex Distressed Assets. I turned to the last page, the fee schedule. My breath caught in my throat. Exit fee. Upon any change of control or sale of the company, lender is entitled to 15% of the gross sale price, in addition to principal repayment. Performance fee. Lender shall receive monthly consulting fees equal to 20% of EBITDA. I looked up. They aren't just charging interest. I said, They are skimming the operating profit. My father nodded. They don't want the loan repaid. Lucy, he said. His voice was hushed. That is the trick. I tried to pay them off last year. I had a line on a traditional bank loan. They blocked it. Blocked it? They have veto power over new debt, he said. They blocked the refinance. They want us to stay in debt. They want the fees. The $5 million wasn't an investment. It was a hook. They hooked us. And now they are just bleeding us dry. And the default? I asked. They want the default, he said. Because if we default, they have the right to force a sale. And do you know who they want to sell it to? I shook my head. Themselves. He said, Through a different shell company, at 10 cents on the dollar, they want to strip the assets, fire the workers, sell the land for condos, and liquidate the brand. I stared at him. So you knew. I said, You knew they were going to dismantle the company. I knew they were cornering me. He said, That is why I needed Ethan to take the estate. If he took the estate, it created a legal delay, a probate pause. It would have bought me 6 months. 6 months to find a white knight buyer. 6 months to save something. He looked at me with pleading eyes. I wasn't trying to hurt Ethan. I was trying to buy time to save the legacy. You were using him as a human shield against a corporate raider. I said, "It is the same thing," he shouted. "In war, it is the same thing." He slumped back. "But it is over now," he said. "You filed the motion. You triggered the clause. They are going to foreclose tomorrow." He looked at the box he was packing. "Unless," he said. "Unless what?" He looked at me. His eyes were sharp again, calculating. "Unless we sell it first," he said. I frowned. "What?" "If we sell the company voluntarily before the foreclosure hits, we can pay off the debt and still walk away with something." "Who would buy it in 24 hours?" I asked. "I have a buyer," he said. "I have been talking to them for a month, a competitor in Ohio. They want the client list and the patents. They don't want the factory. They don't want the town. But they will pay enough to clear the Apex debt." "And the workers?" I asked. "The 300 families?" "They lose their jobs." He said, "The factory closes. And the estate?" "We sell the land." He said, "The lake house, the cottage. We liquidate everything." He leaned forward. "If we do this, Lucy, if you help me facilitate this sale, there will be money left over. Maybe 2 million. Maybe 3. I stared at him. "I will split it with you," he said. "You, me, and Ethan, 1 million each. A clean slate. But I need you to withdraw the motion. I need you to sign off on the sale." I looked at the man sitting across from me. This was his final pivot. He couldn't be the emperor of Briar Glen anymore. He couldn't be the savior. So now, he was just a liquidator. He was willing to sell the town, fire the workers, and sell our childhood home, just to walk away with $1 million and his pride intact. And he was trying to buy my complicity. "You never cared about the legacy." I said softly, "Of course I did." He said, "No." I said, "You cared about control. And now that you have lost control, you just want to cash out." I stood up. "I am not withdrawing the motion." "Dad." He stood up too. "You are throwing away $1 million. I am saving my soul." I said, I walked to the door. "Lucy," he yelled, "if you walk out that door, you get nothing, you hear me? Nothing." I turned back. I looked at him one last time. He looked small. He looked like a man standing in a room full of boxes, holding a letter opener, wondering where his kingdom went. "I have the truth." I said, "That is worth more than $1 million. I walked out. I met Ethan and Naomi at the office. The building was locked. But old Miller let us in. He knew something was wrong. He looked at us with sad eyes. We went to the conference room. I told them everything. The fee skimming, the forced sale, the offer to liquidate the town. "So it is over," Ethan said. "The company is dead. The company was dead 3 years ago." I said, "We are just planning the funeral." My phone buzzed. It was an email from the court. The judge had granted an emergency hearing for the audit demand. "We have the leverage," Naomi said. "We can force Apex to the table. We can expose the predatory lending. We might be able to void the collateral based on fraudulent inducement. It will take years," Ethan said. "And the factory will close anyway." "Yes," I said. "The factory will close. The town will hurt. People will be angry." I looked out the window at Briar Glen. "But they will know the truth," I said. "They will know it wasn't because of the economy. They will know it was because of greed." I looked at Ethan. "And you will be free," I said. "You won't be liable. You won't be bankrupt. You can start over." Ethan looked at me. He took a deep breath. "Do it," he said. I nodded to Naomi. She opened her laptop. She drafted the press release. She drafted the formal affidavit attaching the evidence I had gathered, the circular payments, the secret emails, the leverage scheme. We were about to shatter the family public image. We were about to destroy the company overnight. I held the truth in my hands. The cost of justice was total. My father would never speak to me again. The town might hate me for bringing the walls down. But as I looked at my brother, for the first time in years, I saw him smile. A real smile, the smile of a man who wasn't afraid of his father anymore. I looked at the send button. I didn't hesitate. I pressed it. Thank you for listening to Dad Announced Your Brother Deserves the Entire Estate. Then his company lost its $5.1 million silent partner. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of family secrets and corporate intrigue. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you want more stories about justice, betrayal, and the complex dynamics of revenge, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. And don't forget to share your thoughts on Lucy's final choice in the comments section. Did she do the right thing? I look forward to reading your insights.